Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to Daily Drop-In, the Teach Better Team's morning show that happens every single morning, bright and early at 7 a.m. Eastern. We are so thrilled to have you here to start your morning, or even if you're listening to this after the fact on Teach Better Talk podcast, as we're streaming on probably some of your favorite social media sites, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We appreciate that you're here too. I'm here this morning, Thursday, September 23rd, with the one and only Joshua Stamper, who published a book this week. So we have a whole lot to talk about. Josh, it was so fun to be able to celebrate with you on Tuesday. We've been celebrating you all week long. I cannot wait in this conversation to kind of strategically dive into all the parts of your book. So we will get to that very, 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 very soon. I hope for those of you that are here with us this morning, fill up your coffee. Josh and I were just talking about how we definitely need that extra little oomph in our coffee this morning to wake up on this bright and early, chilly Thursday. But we are thrilled that you're here, and we'll get started all together when we can start right back. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Daily Drop-In. Josh, thanks for joining me this morning.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I have the opportunity to be with you twice live. That's amazing. That's a great week right there.
I truly. And once was very early in the morning and once was very late in the evening. So we're just trying to cover all spaces as much as possible.
Trying to bookend it. It makes sense.
I do have to say, Tuesday going live with you, with the team, was so stinking fun. And I loved that we were able to kind of take a moment. And we did talk about the book, don't get me wrong, but we really just talked about how much we liked you. I mean, I went back and looked at that live, and I mean, we mentioned the book title. It's available on Amazon, whatever, but it was really like the party of Josh is really what I feel like it was.
Yeah, it was very humbling, and I'm honored not only to be on the team, but then to have an event like that and then have, people speak about you in a glorified way or whatever, a wonderful way. And yeah, it was really special. And the video montage that you guys put together, I know Rae, you had a lot of work in that. I had that saved because that was a wonderful gift from the team. So, and then I had the opportunity, my wife jumped in for a little bit, got to share that moment with her too, and that was really fun and unexpected. But the whole day was just special. The amount of people on social media that were just supporting myself in the book and just what it stands for was really touching.
It'll be so fun to dive into that as we get into our conversation. If you're listening now bright and early and you maybe missed our celebration with Josh, we raised a glass to his big accomplishments on Tuesday night at 9 a.m. Eastern. So you can head back over probably on YouTube or Facebook, probably the easiest places to find that. We'd love to have you jump in. We were live for an hour and literally laughed and cheersed about 25 times. And the fact that your wife made an appearance in my mind was the highlight of the whole live because she's so stinking wonderful. And it was that commercial that we were able to play, that little video was just fun because there's so many people that wanted to be a part of the celebration, Josh. And it was cool to be able to find different avenues to kind of get people involved in the celebration. So it's been a long week for you. You've kind of been on the PR train, right? About the book all week. Are you tired at all? I feel like I was exhausted.
I'm a little tired. Yeah. I took Tuesday off. Thankfully, my school is wonderful. They actually surprised me. I don't know if you saw that on social media, but they surprised me with the cake. My family showed up out of nowhere to celebrate also, and the staff was in the library just waiting for me. I thought I had missed a meeting, so I scrambled to get there. And then, they jumped out and said surprise. And it was a nice, amazing celebration. I worked with just a phenomenal staff, and to have their support, and then also, to be allowed to have the day off to go and just celebrate with people, promote the book. And then, had an opportunity to be live with EduMatch, got to be live with the Teach Better team. I had the wonderful opportunity to speak with George Kuros. I was a guest on his podcast, well, probably coming out few weeks later, but to talk to that guy, he's amazing. Jeff Bradbury, I was a guest on his podcast. So just people that are friends that are in the educational space that, have invited for me just to talk about Aspire to Lead. And I'm just so appreciative of that.
Yeah, no, it's been a full week. I feel like your book and I've seen like the cover of the book everywhere. I know a lot of people that ordered on Amazon. It's like being delivered today. Like this is the start of when things are going to start coming in. Amazon told me that mine gets delivered today, and I really wish I had it delivered before 6 a.m. But I think it's going to be such a journey for people who've written books that are a part of our Teach Better family, which, Josh, there's a ton of people in the Teach Better family that have gone through this process. And it's so cool to be able to kind of watch the phases, right? It's like 2-3 days of just talking about this really, really fun experience. And then you get to start seeing the selfies, and then you get to start having people like pull quotes and talk to you about the content. I mean, it's really a surreal experience to be able to have a dialogue so consistently about something that you are so passionate about.
Yeah. And I mean, I was pretty transparent about it too, about like just my history as a student and like leading up to being an art teacher and then all of the struggles. And so like my staff too, read the book. Several have already like they got it on the day. So like I autographed my first book. That was surreal. Right. And then they were talking about different aspects of my life. And I was like, oh yeah, I did put that in that book. Like, oh yeah, I did write about that in that. So like I don't know, people understand like some of this was written a year and a half ago, like when I first started thinking about this idea. And so I'm having to like retrace my steps as to like, oh yeah, this was a really hard trial of mine early in my life that I shared with people. And I need to be able to like speak on that right away, because I think being a window and opening myself up like that, I think gives a little more validity. I don't know if that makes sense. Like that I just didn't like have this perfect, wonderful experience. And I was given all of these wonderful opportunities, and I rose because of connections or not having merit. So to have those conversations a little bit more rich and deeper, that I shared something that I don't typically share, was interesting. I really enjoyed it, actually. So I'm curious to see what those conversations will continue as people get the book and start reading.
Well, and that's a part of the journey too. I mean, even just, you said a lot of this was written a year ago, but then there's like editing and editing and editing and editing. And so even though you may have even remembered writing it a year ago, it doesn't necessarily make it through all the phases of editing. You could have decided to take certain things out or whatever.
Definitely.
So, when people come up and say, oh, I read this chapter in this section, it really spoke to me. And you're like, oh my gosh, now that you say that, I'm remembering that it not only is in there, but it's helpful to know that it's still in the book, that wasn't a section that was edited out for whatever reason. And
for sure,
all those funny conversations. So it seems weird, but kind of you have to like go back and reread your own book to like see what the final product look like.
For sure. Yeah. There's so many different pieces of that process, and it's such a lengthy journey. Like when you're writing, it's hard sometimes to remember every single story that you put in there, or maybe it's something that you started to write on and then you deleted it because you're like, no, that just doesn't connect. And then you think that stayed. So yeah, it's fun.
Such a process. For those of you that are here this morning, good morning. Good morning. We're thrilled that you are starting with us for Daily Drop-In to kick off your day with some positivity, some good conversation. Obviously, Josh, the book coming out this week is a huge focus, but your book coming out on the topic of leadership is going to really blend in beautifully with the conversation we're having here on Daily Drop-In this week around a theme of communication, kind of revamping, reevaluating our communication skills. So we have a lot of dialogue coming. Before we get into that, I need two things. I'm going to say them both, and I'm going to let you kind of dive in as needed. The first is, if for whatever reason their viewers aren't connected to you, can you kind of tell us what you do in education, what you do for the team, all that fun stuff? And then I'd also love to go into kind of a brief summary of the book. We've talked about it in, a very general sense, the writing process. Sure. But if I'm like reading the bio on Amazon, like what's the book about? So good luck with all those questions.
All those questions. So I'll be brief about myself. So I'm Joshua Stamper. I'm the assistant principal in a North Texas middle school, 6th through 8th grade. Been doing that for 8 years. I've been an administrator for 8 years. And like I said before, I was an art teacher and a coach, and then I turned into administrator. Now I also have a podcast, Aspire the Leadership Development Podcast, which was really constructed through my journey of working with aspiring leaders and just loving that experience. And then that led to the book, Aspire to Lead. And then, of course, highlighting being a part of the Teach Better team. And I'm the podcast network manager. And a year ago, we started this crazy idea of collecting a bunch of educators that have podcasts and just wanting to be able to provide as much value through the airwaves to people, no matter where you are in your journey. And we're up to like 30 podcasts now, which is crazy. We have just so many fantastic folks in that group. And today I actually get to meet with them after in the evening. We're doing a podcast mastermind. So I'm so excited about that project. But yeah, it's just been a joy to be on the Teach Better team.
Well, and that specifically, not to cut you off halfway through these questions, but that's brand new, launching today. So for that group, you guys know that for all of our like fun Teach Better offshoots, right? We have like the ambassadors, the speakers network, the podcast network. They kind of all get their own ecosystem of love and support, right? They have their own groups. They have their own little specialized professional development and hangouts. This specifically, you brought this idea to the team. It's launching today. It's exclusive to those in our podcast network. And it's a time that we're going to come together every single Thursday and talk shop, similar to our admin mastermind, similar to our edupreneur mastermind that we offer on the team, except for this one is really for that core group to come together, ask questions, get feedback on the work that they're doing. I mean, you're really creating a very, impactful socialized hub for that podcaster group to come together and say, how can I improve my craft? This is what I'm running into. And they're getting it for free simply by being a part of the network. It's a super cool opportunity, and it launches tonight. Woo, so exciting.
Can't wait. It's awesome. So yeah, the second piece was the book. Yeah. So I'm going to show the cover because I actually got to create the cover, Aspire to Lead. So this was constructed through the podcast. So, and just my experience with educational leaders, I found when I talk about this a lot is, I had an opportunity to work with aspiring leaders in my last district, and we built a program. I worked with 5 amazing assistant principals, and through that process, what it always came down to a lot of times was that folks didn't really have someone to turn to, a mentor to work with to kind of help guide them to get to the next level. And that's where the podcast came from. But through that, I had a lot of time to reflect about my own journey and some advice and pieces that I wanted to share with folks to help guide through the pitfalls, if you will, of leadership, because it's a tough job and it's tough to get the experiences that you need to be prepared to become a leader on a campus or in a district. So I use Aspire as an acronym, and those words are activate, support, persevere, identify, reflect, and execute. And using that model with kind of my journey of being an art teacher all the way up to being an assistant principal. And each chapter is based on things that actually happen in my own life. A lot of times it's failures or missteps, some trials that I had to persevere through or reflect and learn on. And then the second half of the book is about just aspects I think every leader should have, which is empathy, creativity, and passion.
I know that this is going to be such a deep conversation that I'm excited to get into in our next segment for Brainstorm Bank. Before we dive into kind of the inner workings of the book, the connection to our weekly theme for Daily Drop-In this week, before we do all that, can we nerd out just a little about that cover? Because every time you show the cover, every time I'm scrolling and I see it on social media, you should know, Josh, in like lame way, friend to friend, I look at it and I'm like, that was such a good cover. Like it was such a good decision, knowing that you had so much opportunity for what this cover could potentially look like. Can we go through that process? Because that is a really interesting process of writing a book that people don't really talk about. The cover is a big deal.
Well, so in a former life, out of college, I was a fine arts major. I was a graphic designer 3 years until the economy crashed, and I had to pivot because my job essentially got dissolved. It just disappeared. And I frantically had to figure out like what I wanted to do with my life. And Leslie, my wife, was obviously a huge instrument in that of like, hey, what do you want to do that's going to make an impact? What are you passionate about? And obviously the people that were the most important or made the biggest difference outside of my own family was my art teacher and my coach. And so I wanted to kind of like go into a field similar to them. Well, fast forward, obviously I still love graphic design. I still love art, and it's a passion and something that I love to do. So as far as the cover goes, I always, as soon as I started writing, I wanted to create the cover. I just didn't know if that was going to be possible because every publishing company is different. Typically they actually pay someone to create the cover for you, and then it's like this collaboration piece of like, these are the pieces that I would like, these are the images, kind of the feel, the color scheme, the font, all of that, right? You're having those conversations with a designer, and then you pretty much approve a design,
Right.
and of course the
give
publisher.
they give you like 5 options, and you
Yeah.
choose like, oh, I love option 2, or you're like, I hate them all. Let's start over.
Exactly. And usually the publisher has a little bit to say that in that also. So for EduMatch and Sarah to just have my back, and I sent it to her and was like, this is the design I like. What do you think? And like right away she messaged me back like, I love it. And sure enough, that's the cover that we used. And of course, I sent it to some other folks too. Obviously, Rae, you were a big piece in that. I showed you multiple designs, and you were like, I love this one.
I think that's the trickiest part is like, that anytime you're looking at a book, there was 5 or 6 different covers they were considering for that book. And I vividly remember at least my top 2 of this option.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really stuck because I loved the second option for the book, but it wasn't the right option for this book. And every time I see the cover, I'm like, oh, thank God we chose that. Like, thank goodness that was about. And I know that there were so many people that got involved. I really take ownership. Like, I helped with this, even though this was a conversation. But holy cow, every time I'm like, oh, it was the right choice. Every time I see it.
Yeah. I love the design, and it was crazy to like on what was that Tuesday, the book showed up on our doorstep and pulling it out and seeing it. It was pretty wild. So it's fun. It was an amazing process. Like I said, EduMatch really let me like have this vision and like see it through the way that I wanted to, and even downright to the cover.
Yeah. Well, for anybody who is interested in writing a book in their future or is beginning that process, Josh would be a great person to reach out to. I feel like, Josh, you had so much perspective going through this whole piece, but you and I had numerous like comical conversations about the cover specifically, because I love your style with artwork. We've talked about that numerous times. I hope someday that you do all Teach Better graphics. I just think you have such a skill set in this area. But when it comes to a book cover, so many conversations you and I have had with different projects of how to really get the right message across through an image. So thank you for letting me geek out a little about this. I hope people choose to reach out to you, because as much as writing the book is extremely stressful, choosing the cover, choosing the font for whatever reason is so stinking hard. So
yeah, it was, but thankfully I had a little bit of background in the sense that I had the podcast, right? So I kind of had like the style and kind of a brand with colors and fonts that I typically use. So I think that helped a little bit. If it's just starting from scratch, I think that would have been a little bit harder.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate you, really, your wisdom and your insight with design. You do a lot of design work with Teach Better Team too. So
guys, I want to clarify. We were on a Zoom call and he shared his screen. He was like, here are 3 options. I was like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That was about all I did. But it was super cool to be at all involved in the process. So I appreciate it. We're going to get started with our conversation, diving into some of this content. We are officially 18 minutes in. For those of you who need to go fill up your coffee again, please do so. We're here to continue to foster conversation, take your questions live if you have any of them, whether it be about Josh in his life, about his book, about the cover process, whatever sparks your interest, we're here. We're going to transition to our brainstorm bank to really get into that dialogue here on this Thursday morning. So we'll be right back. All right, good morning. You know how the Brainstorm Bank works. We hop on every single morning for daily drop-in and intentionally take a moment to say, hey, do you need anything? The whole concept of our Brainstorm Bank is that we are here to brainstorm alongside you and finding the solutions that you need to best serve your students. You can submit your questions at any point throughout the day whenever something sparks the inspiration for collaboration over at teachbetter.com/daily drop-in. Or, of course, when you join us in the mornings You can always pose your questions here. There's been a lot of questions in our private Facebook group recently at teachbettergroup.com. That's also a great avenue to ask questions. And we just want to be here to service as your buddy to brainstorm when you are trying to find the right solution. So, Josh, this week is themed around communication. It's not so much the beginning of your communication process. We already discussed that on Daily Drop-In, but really this moment of intentionality to reflect, to say, I have been in school for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. How is my communication going? And that component of reflection, that component of communication, and really being intentional with that aligns so well with your focus on wanting to be a part of leadership's, inspiration and growth in regardless of where the educator is in their career. So I was very excited that this kind of all worked out this week to make some of those connections. So when I say reflecting on your communication style, kind of those buzzwords, what comes to mind initially with this dialogue?
Yeah, actually, I was transported to like when I was in a conference and a person was talking about reflection. They asked the crowd, and it was a sea of people, about how often do they reflect and how much time do they spend in the reflection process. And it was very quiet, and I think everyone was mulling over the same idea I had was, I don't really spend too much time reflecting. Like I just don't. I don't schedule that out. It might be on the drive home if I have an opportunity, or if it's never quiet in my house, but like if it's quiet in the house, maybe you're having some time to reflect. So it's more of those times that it just happens organically. It's not something that you're intentional about. And I think, that's something I hit in the chapter on reflection is like, you actually literally need to schedule time for that process. And you need to, like, as an educator, we make thousands of decisions a day. It doesn't matter where you are in education that's occurring. So why are we not spending some time and being intentional about looking back and seeing, okay, were those decisions the correct things? If there's an initiative, was it successful? What are some things we need to change? And same with communication, right? When we're having a meeting with someone, afterwards, we definitely need to reflect on, were those the correct words that we needed to use? Did we have the outcome that we wanted? Was there something that I could have done differently to better communicate to this person? So I would just say that in the reflection process, just time. Like, are you intentional with your time?
Yeah. So let's dive into that, because I think that as educators, many, many educators would agree with you that as they go throughout their day, they're saying, well, Josh, I don't schedule time to reflect. I reflect as I'm eating lunch, maybe in the middle of the day. I reflect because I have a student teacher and I'm facilitating that reflection. So in turn, I'm having my own,
Right.
or I'm reflecting at the very, very end of the night when I'm curled up on the couch with my family, watching a show, thinking through kind of the day that I've experienced. The opportunity that you're inviting here is to actually schedule it into your calendar. And a lot of us as educators live on a bell schedule. We live on those calendar appointments. So what does scheduling that time look like, or what could it potentially look like?
Yeah. So I think the duration of time it doesn't matter. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, it could be 30 minutes. The main thing is it's uninterrupted. And I think that's the biggest thing in education. If we don't schedule it, if we're not intentional about blocking out a specific amount of time, we constantly get interrupted. So when you're talking about sitting on the couch watching TV, you're going to get probably interrupted by your kids or a significant other, right? Or a phone call or a text. Or if you're at school, I mean, we all know, even on an off period, if you're not intentional about your time, you can,
you can close your door, lock your door, and turn your lights off, and you're still going to get interrupted.
Yes. So it's one of those things is like, if the car on the drive home is a quiet place for you, and that's the opportunity for you to reflect, then that is the place and the time for you. So you just need to understand like your schedule, when you're not going to get interrupted, and where you're going to have the most bang for your buck. Because if it is only for 5 minutes, you better not get interrupted, because that 5 minutes is going to go away pretty fast. If it's 10 minutes, same thing. So I think, other projects too, like for instance, if you blog, if you podcast, if you have an outlet to get things out, if you're an artist and you need to draw it out, whatever it may be, like you might need to schedule that too, so that you have that opportunity to reflect and get your thoughts out onto paper or on an audio message. So that way that you can come back to that and gain from that reflection to be better the next time.
So there's two things I want to focus on that you just brought up, and I want to dive deeper into them, even though I know you've already like shared information on it. But one is this moment of scheduled time to reflect, which I really would like to dive further into. Now you've brought up the medium in which we reflect. So I guess when I was thinking, oh, intentional time to reflect, foolishly, I was like, oh, that just means I need to sit in a quiet space and think about my day, right? Like, what did I do today and how did it go? But now you're talking about the opportunity we have to record a podcast episode or journal or whatever. So we're kind of documenting and reflecting in a very different medium. So I don't know which to focus on first, but maybe they'll go together in the end, because my question was, if I have 5 minutes to intentionally reflect and I'm in a quiet space, let's assume I'm in a quiet space in an office or a building, so that way I'm not driving and even having those distractions. How do I start that process? Let's say that I've scheduled the time, the family's away, my door's closed, I'm sitting in my beautifully lit office in my home, and I'm thinking, all right, Rae, time to reflect. Like, where do I begin?
Of course, yeah. So I think you need to be intentional about what you're reflecting on also, right? So that way you have a game plan moving into it. So for instance, if I had a really difficult conversation with a parent, let's say, and I didn't feel like it went very well, and I had ownership of that, and I knew I could have done A, B, and C different. I just didn't know what. So maybe that's in my mind. Okay, that's what I'm going to reflect on for this day, right? As far as the outlet piece, I think that can look a lot of different ways. But I think for myself, and I don't know if anyone watching or listening feels the same way, sometimes I have to actually verbally put that out into the world for me to kind of allow that to resonate, for me to kind of think upon it, kind of mull it over as far as what happened and what I could have done differently. I'm going to throw this out too. Voxer is a great way to reflect. I know that's a tool that I use often. I have an Aspire leadership group that we talk all the time on Voxer. The podcast network has a Voxer group. So it's a way to share what's going on with other people. It allows you to not only vocalize what's happening, but then I also process through that while I'm speaking. And then, of course, people get to speak back to me about maybe what I could have done differently in that opportunity. And then that just builds into that reflection process even deeper.
Yeah, and I think the medium allows you, whatever kind of person you find is easiest for you, it allows you to reflect more deeply. It's more of a comforting, I don't know how to describe that, but I'm sorry, you said it more eloquently than me, but the ability to speak it out loud, hear it, or document it. There's so many people that love the ability to physically write something or type it out in a blog. So many of those opportunities kind of allow our voice to be shared in a different way so that we can even reflect on our reflection. I mean, all of that process kind of allows that documentation. I will say though, Josh, like when you're talking about the reflection process and kind of going through the phase, your focus of identifying a specific moment or situation to reflect on adds a whole nother strategic dynamic to the reflection. I mean, if you sit down and want to reflect on your whole day, you could spend hours going through the first 10 minutes of how you got your day started, much less getting to the end of the day when you're actually sitting back to reflect. So that identification of what you want to reflect on is extremely important.
Oh, most definitely. And if we only have 5 or 10 minutes of uninterrupted time, we need to make sure that everything's lined up before we get there, so that way it's a smooth process. So it's very similar to like getting ready for your day, right? If like the night before, I get everything ready, I will have a much smoother operation the next morning as I'm getting ready, and it'll be very efficient, and I'll be out the door quicker because I set the pieces up prior to that. And it's no different in the reflection process. We need to make sure that we're doing that in our mind prior to, so that way when the table is already set for the meal, and so that way when our 5 minutes or 10 minutes comes up, we can sit down and we can, go through that process. So it's similar if you're writing a book, right? I mean, if I didn't know what I was writing about before I sat down to write, obviously that's not going to be a very effective session of time writing. So, or same thing with journaling. If I'm reflecting, if I'm needing to do some sketch notes because I want to like process that out, well, obviously I need to know what I'm going to be reflecting on prior to that. So it's just about setting the table.
It's interesting, Josh, the work that you do with aspiring leaders is really, it's a wide range. I think most people, when they think education leadership, they're thinking principal. Like that is the first
Yeah.
thought. And what I really love and appreciate and value about the work you continue to do, not just with this book, but just throughout your entire career, at least since I've been stalking the work you've been doing, it is always about everybody's a leader. I mean, especially teachers, like holy cow in this field, even if you are a first year teacher in your second month, congratulations, you're a leader. And these skills are things that we all need to possess because we all have leadership responsibilities. And as I'm thinking about facilitated reflection, my best and probably most challenging moments of reflection were when I was mentoring a student teacher. I've had, student teachers in my past, and sometimes they were with me for only a few weeks or a semester or a full year, which has been such a blessing to have those opportunities as well. And taking time to intentionally reflect on a mini lesson that they had or one specific class hour, even though they taught all day long. I mean, those were the moments that were so difficult because, you're taking somebody who, is doing absolute incredible work, but definitely has areas to grow. And you're fostering reflection while you yourself are reflecting on the work being done. So there's kind of a lot of layers of this. And whether you're reflecting for yourself or helping someone else facilitate some reflection, there's a lot of components here that can help you be more successful than others.
Yeah, I mean, having a student teacher or someone that's aspiring to be a leader, like I have a mentee right now, he comes down to the office to get experience. I mean, that process for me is invaluable because there's constantly questions being asked about, well, why do you do this? And some days it's like, I don't know. I don't know why we do that. Let's discuss that. Let's figure this out. Like, why is this something that's a tradition that has just been passed on? Is there something that was really intentional about the decision that was made for us to have this process? So, like, I love that dynamic. Some of my favorite times in education was when I was an aspiring leader on my campus, going in to talk to my mentor, my assistant principal at the time, Sandra Pegram, who is also a contributing author in the book. But having those like really deep and those conversations about just leadership and theory and like breaking it down. And she always was so wonderful about allowing that reflection process and not being challenged by my questions and accepting like new ideas. And sometimes they were dumb because I was inexperienced and had no clue what I was doing. But like at least she listened to it and then like walked me through that process. And I think for any educator, no matter where you are, one, you are a leader. But two, you need to have someone to process with. You need to have someone to bounce ideas off of, to challenge ideas, to have questions and deep, rich conversations about the really tough job that we're in. I mean, it's tough.
It's funny. I have a number of friends, very, very close friends, that are experiencing student teachers right now during this school year. And student teachers are hard enough, much less than 2021. In 2020, it was terrible, but it's a process to have somebody with you all the time in the classroom that you are constantly reflecting with. Some of the jokes about having a student teacher, I know a lot of educators are like, it's great, I love mentoring, but you're never alone because they're always around, right? Like you're really forming a partnership here.
Yep.
But facilitated reflection, not only with yourself or with somebody else, is really challenging, and you have to be so intentional. And the concept of a student teacher, you can be seen through, like you said, numerous different opportunities in education, whether you're mentoring a teacher that's new to the building, mentoring a future leader, mentoring somebody like a principal, mentoring an assistant principal who just started the job, or vice versa. I mean, there's so many layers to moments when we as educators take on the role of helping someone else reflect, that making sure we're intentional with our own reflection needs to stay at the forefront of our time. But I loved your line of, sometimes people ask me, you're like, I don't know why I do that. And that's good reflection for us.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do that we have done over time that we just lost the focus of why we do it. So why not challenge? Because like you said, it's 2021. Our model of education is so much different now than it was even just a couple years ago, that question needs to be asked. Why are we doing this? Is there a better way to do it for the time that we're in right now? And I know that student teachers or young teachers just in general get a bad rap of, they don't know anything, but they bring so much to the table and they're so valuable in their ideas and like just questioning, just simple questions of wondering why the school runs the way it does. And I think we need to embrace that more.
So reflection is always like we've discussed thus far, a difficult thing that we need to constantly do. And I really appreciate your intentionality, your suggestion of making sure that it's scheduled into our day. And whether you schedule it for 2 minutes because that's the best you can do that day, or you schedule it for a longer chunk of time, the moment that we have, regardless of when it is in our day, to say, okay, how is this going, is extremely important. For our theme this week, we've been reflecting on our communication so far. So this is kind of layering into this dialogue. This is an intentional moment that we're choosing to take numerous times this week to say, this is the type of communication I'm having with students. This is the type of communication I'm having with parents. This is the type of communication I'm having with leadership or my teammates or my colleagues. How is that going? And I love that this is now a dialogue around, yes, you can do that, but it really needs to be scheduled. And the hope would be that there's some action steps that come from that. So, Josh, as you're reflecting on your own communication style this year, which I'm sure is like, very, very layered, what do you feel like is an area that we can begin with in this dialogue for ourselves, as hopefully every educator in the Teach Better family is taking that moment to say, how is this going for me?
Yeah, I think communication, when you're reflecting on that specifically, can look a lot of different ways. And maybe it's hard to even like pinpoint what you're even focusing on. And I think when I'm speaking with like our staff and admin team, just like how are we modeling and how are we like communicating non-verbally and verbally with everybody and making that a focus. So obviously our students, sometimes they look older than they are and they look like they should possess all of these amazing skills in communication, but a lot of them don't have those skills. And so the main focus for us is to like make sure that we're not only modeling that, but then breaking it down as far as what their nonverbals are and what they're communicating. Because as we all know, 70% of communication is nonverbal. So the same goes with teachers, right? So like making sure, and I say this a lot, is being the window, not the mirror, right, in our communication. So a lot of times our students, especially now, they've gone through a lot, and their communication as they come back to school from being virtual to in person, it's not up to par. Like they're struggling right now as far as getting back into the routine of school and socialization and being on for 8 hours in a school building. And so like our reflection is, okay, how was that communication with our student? Were we modeling the correct style, the way that we want them to communicate to us? And if we're not, then how can we go about that and reteach and show the way that we're supposed to be communicating? And so that's been a big conversation with our staff lately of like, how are we communicating even when it's a tough emotional situation? And if that didn't go well, like how do we restore that moving forward?
So powerful, so important. Communication has so many different layers, whether it comes to the medium in which we're communicating, the topic about that we're communicating, the language that we're using. I can only imagine that there's dialogue that we could have in this space for not only this week, but truly probably all year long, having those intentional moments of reflection. If you had to give one piece of advice to an educator listening, it's Thursday, September 23rd. They're sitting back and they're like, okay, fine. I listened to Daily Drop-In all week. Joshua Stamper finally really helped me understand that I should be doing this. What is one piece of advice that you can give to an educator to think through for their communication style?
Well, I'm going to give you two.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to cheat, right?
I love when you give me more than I asked for. That was awesome.
So obviously we talked about being intentional with our time to actually reflect. So we've already established that, but I really find that the second piece is that you're finding support in that. So you're not doing this journey alone in your reflection, that you at least have someone to bounce off ideas in that reflection process. Or if you need to vent, to hear yourself and process, that you have a safe space for that. So yes, you do need to do reflection by yourself sometimes, but sometimes it requires you to have it with another person where there's their support system or a community, right? So I think those two pieces are really, really important. And so even though you asked for one, I'm giving you two.
That's good. So good. So much more for us to think on. We're going to transition here to our good news stories for the morning to get everybody started with some love and positivity. And Josh, I know this isn't going to surprise you. there's a lot to celebrate today. And so we're going to make sure that we conclude our daily drop-in conversation with those celebrations. If you need to brush your teeth real quick, we'll be right back. So hurry up. Hey family, we are continuing our conversation with not only the style in which we reflect and communicate, but also with the one and only Joshua Stamper. I want to make sure, Josh, while we get into some good news, we also share a little bit about where the book that launched this week is located, so everybody that can go and order it and be a part of our continuous conversation, not only about reflection, not only about our communication, but really about how we can be better leaders. So we're going to get into that soon. Josh, there's a lot to celebrate today. I know this is a big week for you, and we'll go down in history in your world as the week that the book was published. But this will also be a big celebration for other pieces as well. So should we get into some themes, some celebrations, around the world right now?
Let's do it.
All right. So there are a lot of holidays going on. And depending on the school environment that you foster, depending on kind of what interests you and what might interest your student body, all these different celebrations could be avenues for you to open a door to have a conversation with a student. There are a lot today, so I was going to pick out a few that I thought really would resonate. One is that September 23rd is Celebrate Bisexuality Day. So that is an opportunity for us to have some of that dialogue with our students, or have some of that dialogue with our colleagues or our family. As we discuss every single time we bring good news and celebrations into our world, it's not only about our communication with our students. It is about our communication, the building of relationships with everyone in our lives. And so as you wake up for this early morning, we want you to consider not only sharing these good news, these celebrations with potential opportunities with students, but really the opportunity to have this dialogue with your spouse or your best friend that calls you in the morning, or the colleague down the hall that you feel like you're trying to build a relationship with. So these are all fun moments to celebrate. It's also International Day of Sign Languages. I thought that was a really interesting holiday. Sign language has always been something that I've been interested in. Josh, I know you're somebody who use sign language with your children, right?
Well, yeah. So when they were much younger, granted, they before they could speak, we would do what's called signing time. It was these videos that allowed them to communicate, and all of our children did this prior to, is before they could even speak. They wanted more food, or they want food, that way, more, right, or please, thank you. So we did these videos with them, and then we kind of learned with them all of these different signs, and then we were able to communicate with them prior to them even being able to speak any words outside of like mama and dada.
Yeah, no, and I see that a lot with children, especially that young age, like the babies, where as they are forming the ability to speak, vocally, they're communicating through their ability to move their arms or go through their hand motions. And it's funny to me that goes away. I really would love to do some further study, in my free time, to explore why sign language doesn't continue to be an intentional way that we communicate. Yeah. I think it's such a cool language. I know there's a lot of different variations of it around the world, but I think sign language is a language that we all should have some knowledge of. And I think it's kind of strange that we don't, but I don't. I would love to learn more about that.
I mean, I still use all done. I mean, like in certain situations where I'm not able to communicate in like a social situation with my kids, like they still know, like if I do that, it's time to go, let's wrap it up. So, I mean, there's still ways that we still use it still today, 14 years after we started using it with my oldest. So, I agree. And I love, that high schools are starting to bring sign language in as a language. So, you can take Spanish, you can take French, but then you can also take sign language. And I think that's so important to have that as an option for every school.
Yeah, I love the ability to communicate without speaking. I think there's so many benefits to being able to communicate, whether it be to a friend, a peer, a family member, without having to be in a quiet space so they can hear your voice. I think it's so interesting. I mean, there's so many connections you can make here, but with our animals, with our pets, so many of us that are training puppies, use use physical gestures instead of a voice command. And so all of those different pieces, ways that we communicate are kind of cool. But anyway, what a cool day to acknowledge that and maybe bring that into the classroom of learning a bit of sign language today. I like that.
Yeah.
The other thing I think we should note is that it's Redhead Appreciation Day. So I don't know how many redheads in our Teach Better family are listening, but happy Redhead Day.
Yeah.
Always good.
Happy Redhead Day. Love it.
I love it. And there's also a lot. I mean, there's truly, I'm not reading them all, but Teal Talk Day was also something that I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge as well. So as you are all thinking through the celebrations that you want to, be a part of today, feel free to go check that out. As we've mentioned numerous times, not only Rachel from the Teach Better team, shout out to her that provides us with that information, but also we are using nationaltoday.com to give us that information. So it's always good. Josh, are you an animal lover?
Yeah, got a couple dogs myself.
How do you feel about rhinos? Would you ever have a rhino at the house?
No, I don't think that would go well.
What about like a zoo? Maybe a zoo, see a rhino?
Yeah, the Dallas Zoo has got some rhinos, so we go and see the animals there. Yes, why?
Well, rhinos are part of a good news story. I thought this was interesting. And I would totally, as a former middle school teacher, I would totally bring this into my students because there are so many different layers to this conversation. Not only about cool animals. I mean, truly, I think rhinos are pretty cool. I mean, they've got horns. It's awesome. But also, this is about a species that actually was in severe concern for losing this population of specific rhinos. That is a celebration story to talk about, extinction and all these endangered wildlife species. This is really cool. This is a rare rhino species, sees a dramatic population growth from just 100 to 37,000 as of today, as poaching actually continues to fall, which is a wonderful opportunity. It says the population of species of rhinos is increasing, some dramatically, while poaching rates in East Asia are plummeted over the last decade. This is a new report from the International Rhino Foundation, which is always cool. I want to go Google that foundation. But they're doing a lot of research in how they are working to build up this population of rhinos. It goes through keeping the rhino numbers in a healthy recovery, increasing manner. It says that they've invested over $20 million worldwide for the conservation of this specific species over the last 10 years. And they're seeing a huge success of this slowly increasing the population. It goes through a lot of interesting pieces. I'd love to recommend this article to everybody listening to the Daily Drop-In on the Good News Network, because it goes through what it means to have an endangered species, what it means to poach, and what that actually looks like. It goes through where on the map these rhinos are located in Asia, in Indonesia, and really goes through all of these interesting elements. The one thing I did like here is in Africa, the black rhino has seen an encouraging population increase of 16 to 17% over the last decade. So it really goes through kind of that fun dialogue. So I feel like there were a lot of layers in that good news story, but one of which is celebrating that we have a species that is beginning to thrive again in that area of a beautiful animal. So very cool.
Very cool. Yeah, the poaching piece is, that seems to be increased in certain areas. So it's great to hear a story where that's actually decreasing and that the species is able to thrive because of that.
Yeah, so I really like that. And depending on what you teach or the student population, there's a lot of layers in this article that, if you taught art, you could even utilize this article to have some of that dialogue and use it as a project. I really love that some of these articles can really become interdisciplinary conversations between our content areas. So.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, we used to use animals and stories in our classroom all the time. So I think that's a great idea, Rae.
So fun. Well, for those of you who are getting your morning started with the Daily Drop-In, we appreciate that you're here. Josh, it was really fun to be able to kind of talk shop about education, talk about some good news stories and celebrations and holidays going on today. I feel like there were a lot of layers of our dialogue, which I'm excited to listen back to this after the fact and just continue to reflect on my own reflection, to be honest with you. So I appreciated your suggestions. The book being a major deal, of course, I want to make sure that everybody in the Teach Better family is able to go pick up the book and begin this journey of not only taking a selfie with it, which I will be doing today when mine gets delivered, but also all the pieces of reading it, consuming it, questioning it, asking, follow-up dialogue on these topics. So where can they get the book and all those details?
So Amazon and Barnes & Noble, you can get that. Edumatch.com also. And then if you're looking to get 10 or more for your campus, for your aspiring leaders or any leaders really on the campus, there's a discount. So I think it's like 20% on Edumatch.com. So you can get it that way. And then, in each chapter, there's reflection questions. So we're talking about reflection today. After each chapter, you're able to then go through and hopefully be intentional, right, of spending a little bit of time with a few questions after each chapter to reflect on your leadership journey.
Well, and just to add one more layer to this, Josh, you're talking about a book rate that if you get a few books that you could read with friends, you get a discount. I didn't even think about that. So with this book, you could choose to purchase it for your whole leadership team. Maybe you have not even just leadership teams. I apologize. I keep thinking like principals, assistant principals, but we're talking anybody in your building who is working to be a leader. This could not only be a good gift, but you could do a book study with it. I really love that book is designed in a way to be a collaborative conversation.
Yeah. I have a couple of teachers on my own campus that just told me yesterday that they're going to do a book study, and I was floored because I was like, really? But it's set up, like you said, for them to go through and have those rich conversations based on the discussion questions on each chapter. So it's intentional. It was written for teachers, right? And for anyone that's aspiring to be something more than they are today, right? We're all wanting to be better each and every day. So that's what this is about. And it's cool. Like there's other people in other professions that have reached out and said, hey, I'm going to buy this book because of the principles that are inside of it. So even though it's stories on education, they still translate to other areas of professions because of the principles that are in there.
So important. I can't wait to see the people's response from this incredible work that you've been able to do. And I'm so thrilled that they can go pick it up. And all these different locations, Amazon. For me, I ordered on Amazon, not to brag, but it was like literally 2 clicks and it better.
Yes.
I'm going to be sitting at my door, like looking through my window. Where's the book? It'll be so fun. But
can't wait.
It'll be really great, Josh, as people continue this week and next week to get the book physically in their hands, start diving into each chapter and posting their reflection. So make sure to all of our friends out there, go follow the hashtag for the book. You'll be able to see a lot of dialogue there. That's a really strategic and wonderful way for you to be able to read a book and kind of do your own book study with friends around the world who are reading the similar text. And hopefully they'll go connect with you, Josh, and obviously all the work that you're doing with the Teach Better team is incredible. But I'm really excited and proud of you. So I'm so thrilled that we were able to have this dialogue this morning.
Oh, it's always an honor to speak with you, Rae. Thank you so much.
So fun. For everybody else, we hope you enjoy your last few sips of coffee. I'm going to go fill mine up again. It was kind of one of those mornings I need another cup of coffee to keep us going. We hope that you have an absolutely incredible Thursday, friends. This is the best Thursday that's going to come at you. So get ready to really embrace all the wonderful things that are coming your way. And we will see you again tomorrow morning for Daily Drop-In at 7 a.m. Eastern with Brad Hughes as we kind of wrap up this conversation of reflection on our communication styles and kick off a very exciting weekend. So, Josh, thank you again for joining us. And for everybody else, we will see you later. Bye, guys.
Thank you.